Sarah Mitchell stood in line with 40 other recruits on the hot asphalt of Naval Station Great Lakes, just north of Chicago. The August sun beat down on her shaved head, and sweat rolled down her back under the stiff new uniform. She was 23 years old, lean and strong from years of running track in high school and working construction jobs to save money for college. But college had never happened. Life had taken her down a different road, and now here she was, starting over. The drill instructor paced in front of them like a caged tiger. His name was Staff Sergeant Brennan, and his voice could strip paint off a wall. "You think you're tough," he shouted. "You think you're special. Let me tell you something. Nobody cares who you were before you got here. Your mama's not here. Your daddy's not here. You are nothing but a blank page, and we're gonna write on you whether you like it or not." Sarah kept her eyes forward, her jaw tight. She had heard stories about boot camp. She knew it would be hard, but she also knew she could handle hard. She had been handling hard her whole life. Next to her stood a tall guy named Reynolds who kept shifting his weight from foot to foot. On her other side was a smaller woman named Garcia who looked like she might throw up. Sarah wanted to tell Garcia it would be okay, but she knew better than to speak. "You," Staff Sergeant Brennan suddenly appeared in front of Sarah. His face was 6 inches from hers. "What's your name, recruit?" He stared at her for another long moment, then moved on down the line. Sarah let out a small breath but kept her posture perfect. She had made it through the first test. The day went on forever. They ran. They did push-ups. They learned how to make a bed so tight a quarter would bounce on it. They learned how to march in formation. And they learned that nothing they did would ever be good enough for Staff Sergeant Brennan. By evening, Sarah's muscles ached in places she didn't know existed. The recruits shuffled into the mess hall and ate in silence. The food was bland, but she was so hungry she barely tasted it. Around her, she could see the exhaustion on every face. Reynolds looked like he had aged 5 years in one day. Garcia's eyes were red, though Sarah couldn't tell if it was from crying or just pure tiredness. That night in the barracks, Sarah lay in her narrow bunk and stared at the ceiling. Around her, she could hear quiet sounds, someone sniffling, someone else shifting in their sleep, the creak of bed frames. She thought about her mother who had died 3 years ago from cancer. She thought about her younger brother who was now living with their aunt in Wisconsin. She thought about the promise she had made at her mother's grave, that she would make something of herself, that she would find a purpose. The tattoos on her body itched under the thin blanket. She had 5 of them, scattered across her arms and shoulders. Most were simple designs: a compass rose, a mountain range, a line of script that said "unbreakable" in flowing letters. These were the visible ones, the ones she had gotten during her wild years after high school when she didn't know what to do with her grief. But there was one tattoo that nobody had seen yet. It was on her left shoulder blade, usually hidden by her uniform. And unlike the others, this one meant everything. The next morning came too early. Sarah jolted awake to the sound of trash cans being beaten with metal poles. Staff Sergeant Brennan's voice echoed through the barracks. "Up, up, up. You got 2 minutes to be dressed and in formation." The recruits scrambled out of bed, pulling on uniforms with shaking hands. Sarah moved quickly, her muscles protesting. She had barely tied her boots when Brennan appeared at the end of her row of bunks. "Mitchell, what's that on your arm?" Sarah's heart sank. In a rush, her sleeve had ridden up, exposing the compass rose tattoo on her forearm. "It's a tattoo, sir." "I can see that, Mitchell. You think you're artistic. You think you're special because you got some ink." "No, sir." Other recruits were starring now. Brennan grabbed Sarah's arm and held it up for everyone to see. "Look at this, we got a rebel here. We got someone who thinks they can express themselves." His voice dripped with sarcasm. "This ain't art class, Mitchell. This is the United States Navy. Your body don't belong to you anymore. It belongs to us. And we don't need your personal decorations." Sarah felt her face burn but kept her expression neutral. "Yes, sir." "Drop and give me 50. Sarah hit the floor and started doing push-ups. Her arms shook, but she pushed through the burn. She could feel dozens of eyes on her. When she finished, she jumped back to her feet. "Now get in formation before I make it 100. Sarah ran outside with the others. But the damage was done. Word spread fast in boot camp. By midday, everyone knew that Mitchell had tattoos. And in the strange social hierarchy of new recruits looking for any way to feel superior, Sarah had become a target. During lunch, she overheard two guys talking. "Did you see all that ink on Mitchell?" one said. "Probably got them in some dive bar. Probably doesn't even remember getting half of them." The other one laughed. "I bet she was a real wild child before she came here, probably running with a bad crowd." Sarah ate her food and said nothing. She knew that defending herself would only make it worse, but inside, anger simmered. These people didn't know her. They didn't know what she had been through. They didn't know that every tattoo had a story, a meaning, a memory she carried. That afternoon, during physical training, Staff Sergeant Brennan made them do a swimming test. They had to swim 50 meters in full uniform, then tread water for 5 minutes. As they changed into their PT gear, Sarah pulled off her shirt. For the first time, several of her tattoos were visible: the compass, the mountains, the script on her ribs. A woman named Chen made a disgusted sound. "God, how many does she have?" Another recruit, a guy named Porter with a thick Boston accent, shook his head. "My dad always said people with tattoos are trouble. Can't trust someone who marks up their body like that." Sarah wanted to tell Porter that his dad was an ignorant fool, but she bit her tongue and dove into the pool. The water was cold and the uniform dragged at her limbs, but she swam hard and fast. She finished in the top 5. When she climbed out, gasping, Staff Sergeant Brennan gave her a tiny nod, the first sign of approval she had seen from him. But the other recruits weren't impressed. As they walked back to the barracks, Reynolds muttered just loud enough for her to hear, "Probably learned to swim running from the cops." That night Sarah lay in her bunk again and felt more alone than she had in years. She had come to boot camp hopping to start fresh, to become part of something bigger than herself. Instead, she was an outsider all over again. The tattooed girl, the troublemaker, the one who didn't fit in. She touched the hidden tattoo on her shoulder blade through her shirt. Soon, she thought, soon they'll understand. But first, she had to survive 13 more weeks of boot camp. And from the looks of things, it was going to be a very long 13 weeks. The mockery got worse as the days passed. What started as whispers became open comments. Sarah had hoped that once everyone got tired and focused on their own survival, they would forget about her tattoos. But somehow, her ink had become the thing that set her apart in a place where everyone was supposed to be the same. During week 2, while they were learning how to fold their uniforms, a recruit named Kowalski held up his shirt and said loudly, "Look, everybody, I'm gonna be just like Mitchell." He had drawn fake tattoos on his arms with a marker, crude skulls and crossed bones. Several people laughed. Garcia, who had been friendly to Sarah the first day, looked away and said nothing. Reynolds joined in the laughter. Even Chen, who usually kept to herself, smiled. Staff Sergeant Brennan walked by, saw Kowalski's marked-up arms and made him scrub them off with a wire brush. But he didn't stop the jokes. He didn't tell them to leave Sarah alone. In Brennan's world, if you couldn't handle some teasing, you didn't deserve to be in the Navy. Sarah told herself it didn't matter. She had been bullied before, back in middle school when her clothes were old and her lunch was whatever she could scrounge from home. She had survived that. She could survive this. But it wore on her. Every day another comment, every meal another whispered joke. The isolation grew heavier. In week 3, during hand-to-hand combat training, she was paired with Porter. They were supposed to practice holds and breaks, but Porter went harder than necessary. When Sarah ended up on the mat with her arm twisted behind her back, he leaned close and whispered, "How about I give you another tattoo? Maybe tear your skin up a little so you match on both arms." Sarah swept his legs and reversed the hold so fast that Porter yelped. The instructor, a grizzled Navy veteran named Chief Davis, watched with interest. "Good move, Mitchell, but ease up. This is training, not a street fight." "Yes, Chief." Porter glared at her as they reset. "You're crazy," he muttered. "Probably got that from whatever gang you ran with." That evening, Sarah found all her uniforms in a pile outside the barracks. Someone had poured soap powder all over them. She would have to wash everything and re-iron it before morning inspection. It would take hours. Garcia walked by and saw Sarah gathering her clothes. For a moment, their eyes met. Sarah saw something like pity there, maybe even guilt, but Garcia kept walking. Sarah carried her uniforms to the laundry room and started washing them one by one. It was past midnight when she finished ironing the last shirt. She had gotten maybe 3 hours of sleep before the morning wake-up call came crashing through the barracks. At formation, Staff Sergeant Brennan inspected everyone's uniforms. When he got to Sarah, he looked her up and down with his sharp eyes. "Mitchell, you look like death warmed over." "Yes, sir. No, sir, I'm fine, sir." "You better be, because today we're doing the confidence course, and if you can't keep up, you're going to wash out of my program. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." The confidence course was a series of obstacles designed to test strength, agility, and mental toughness. There were walls to climb, ropes to swing on, a cargo net stretched over a pit of muddy water. Sarah had been looking forward to it. Physical challenges were her strong suit. But running on 3 hours of sleep, her body felt like it was made of lead. The recruits started the course in groups of 5. Sarah was grouped with Reynolds, Chen, Kowalski, and a quiet guy named Martinez who never spoke to anyone. They ran to the first obstacle, a 6-foot wall. Sarah hit it at full speed, planted her foot, and pulled herself over. Her arms screamed in protest, but she made it. Behind her, she heard Kowalski grunt, "Show off." They moved through the course, balance beams, rope climbs, a low crawl under barbed wire. Sarah pushed through the pain and exhaustion. She could feel her body starting to shut down, but she refused to quit. Not here, not in front of these people. The last obstacle was a 30-foot rope climb. You had to climb up, ring a bell at the top, and climb back down. Sarah reached the rope and started climbing. Her hands were raw and bleeding from earlier obstacles. Her shoulders burned. Halfway up, her grip slipped. She caught herself, but just barely. Below her, she heard someone laugh. Her vision blurred. For a moment, she considered just letting go, dropping into the safety net below, washing out of boot camp and going back to her old life. It would be so easy. Then she thought about her mother, about the promise she made, about the tattoo on her shoulder blade that nobody had seen yet. Sarah gritted her teeth and kept climbing, hand over hand, inch by inch. When she reached the top and slapped the bell, the sound echoed across the training ground. She climbed down slowly, carefully. When her feet hit the ground, her legs almost gave out. Staff Sergeant Brennan was waiting at the finish line with a stopwatch. "Mitchell, you just barely made the time limit. If you had been 2 seconds slower, you would have failed." "Yes, sir." "But you didn't fail. Do you know why?" "No, sir." "Because quitting isn't in your vocabulary. I've been watching you, Mitchell. These other recruits think you're weak because of some ink on your skin, but I see something different. I see someone who keeps getting up." Sarah blinked in surprise. It was the closest thing to a compliment she had heard from Brennan. "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet. You still got a long way to go." That night, exhausted and aching, Sarah finally broke down. She waited until everyone was asleep, then quietly cried into her pillow. She thought about quitting. She thought about calling her aunt and asking to come home. The loneliness and constant mockery were worse than any physical pain. But in the morning, she got up again. She put on her uniform. She stood in formation. Because that's what her mother had taught her: you keep going even when it hurts, especially when it hurts. Week 4 brought classroom training on naval history and protocol. Sarah threw herself into the studies, grateful for something to focus on besides the whispers and sideways glances. She scored in the top 5 on every test. Brennan noticed, but the other recruits just found new reasons to dislike her. Teacher's pet, Kowalski said during a break, probably cheating off someone anyway. Porter laughed. Or maybe she's just used to memorizing things, like gang signs and prison rules. Sarah ignored them. She had learned that defending herself only gave them more ammunition. So she stayed quiet, kept her head down, and counted the days until graduation. But inside, the anger grew. Not the hot, explosive kind of anger that makes you do something stupid. The cold, patient kind. The kind that waits for the right moment. That moment was coming. Sarah could feel it. And when it did, everyone in this camp was going to learn something about the tattooed girl they had dismissed and mocked. They were going to learn who she really was. Week 6 of boot camp brought new challenges. The recruits were halfway through training and the pressure increased. They learned emergency procedures, practiced firefighting, and began weapons training. The group had started to separate into leaders and followers. Reynolds had become the unofficial spokesman for their division. Chen showed unexpected talent in marksmanship. Even Garcia had found her place, helping others with the academic material. Sarah remained on the outside. She performed well, always in the top 10 in physical tests, always passing her written exams, but the social isolation continued. The other recruits had formed bonds, friendships forged through shared suffering. Sarah ate alone, stood alone during breaks, and spoke only when spoken to. Staff Sergeant Brennan seemed to notice. One afternoon, after a particularly grueling drill session, he called her into his office. It was a small, sparse room with a metal desk and a single photo on the wall. Brennan with a group of soldiers somewhere overseas, all of them dusty and exhausted but smiling. "Sit down, Mitchell." Sarah sat rigidly in the chair across from his desk. Her mind raced through possibilities. Was she being kicked out? Had someone filed a complaint against her? Brennan leaned back in his chair and studied her for a long moment. "You've been here 6 weeks. You're performing adequately in all areas. Some areas better than adequately. So why do you look like you're about to face a firing squad?" "I don't know what you mean, sir." "Don't play dumb with me, Mitchell. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I see everything that happens in my camp. I know the other recruits give you a hard time. I know about the comments, the jokes, the little acts of sabotage." Sarah said nothing. What was there to say? "I also know you haven't reported any of it. You haven't complained, haven't asked to switch divisions, haven't caused any problems. So I'm going to ask you a question and I want an honest answer. Why are you here?" "Sorry." "Why did you join the Navy? And don't give me some recruiting poster answer about serving your country. That's true for everyone here. I want to know what brought you, specifically, to my boot camp." Sarah hesitated. She had never told anyone the full story, but something about Brennan's direct gaze made her want to trust him. "My mother died 3 years ago, sir, cancer. Before that, my father died when I was 10, car accident. My mom raised me and my younger brother alone. She worked 3 jobs. She never complained, never quit, never gave up. Even when she got sick, she kept fighting." Brennan nodded slowly. "Go on." "After she died, I didn't handle it well. I made some bad choices, got some tattoos, hung around with people who weren't good for me. But I never did anything illegal, sir. I was lost. My brother went to live with our aunt and I felt like I had failed him, failed my mom, failed everyone." "So you joined the Navy to find direction?" "Yes, sir, but it's more than that." Sarah took a deep breath. "My father was in the Navy. He was a SEAL. I never really knew him. He died during a training accident when I was young. But my mom told me stories about him, about his honor, his dedication, his sacrifice. I came here because I want to understand him. I want to be worthy of him." Brennan's expression changed. Something sharp and interested flickered in his eyes. Your father was a SEAL. What was his name? James Mitchell, sir. He was part of SEAL Team 3. Brennan sat forward suddenly. James Mitchell, big guy, always cracking jokes, had a scar on his left hand from a training mishap. Sarah felt her heart pound. Yes, sir, that's him. Did you know him? I served with him briefly many years ago, before he made SEAL. He was a good man, Mitchell, one of the best. His death was a real loss. Brennan's expression softened slightly. Does anyone here know about this? No, sir, I haven't told anyone. Why not? Sarah looked down at her hands. Because I didn't want special treatment. I didn't want people to think I was using my father's service to get ahead. And honestly, sir, I didn't think anyone would believe me anyway. Not with, she gestured vaguely at her arms. Not with the tattoos, Brennan finished. Not when they've already decided who you are. Yes, sir. Brennan stood and walked to the window. Outside, recruits were running laps around the field. He watched them for a moment, then turned back to Sarah. You've got one tattoo I haven't seen yet, don't you? On your back. Sarah froze. How did you know, sir? Because I'm observant, and because I know that the other tattoos you have, the visible ones, they're just window dressing. The real one, the one that matters, you keep hidden. Am I right? Slowly Sarah nodded. Yes, sir. Stand up, show me. Sarah stood and turned around. With shaking hands, she pulled off her jacket and lifted the back of her shirt. On her left shoulder blade was a tattoo that nobody in boot camp had seen. It was the SEAL trident, the eagle, anchor, trident, and pistol that marked Navy SEALs. But this wasn't just any trident. Underneath it was a name, James Mitchell, and beneath that dates, his birth and death, and at the bottom in small script, until we meet again. Brennan stared at the tattoo for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. When did you get this? 2 years ago, sir, on the anniversary of his death. I went to a tattoo artist in Chicago who specializes in military memorial tattoos. I showed him photos of my dad, his service record, everything. The artist made sure every detail was perfect. It's the only tattoo I have that I actually planned. All the others were impulsive, but this one I needed. Why on your back? Why where you can't see it? Because it's not for me to see, sir. It's for me to carry, like a burden, but a good burden. It reminds me that I'm not alone, even when I feel alone. My father's watching my back, always. Brennan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Pull your shirt down and sit back down." Sarah did as ordered, her heart racing. She had never shown anyone that tattoo. It felt like exposing a piece of her soul. Brennan sat behind his desk again and looked at her intently. In 2 weeks we have our graduation ceremony. There will be officers present, including Commander Peterson. He was your father's commanding officer for a time. He knew James well. In fact, he was there the day your father died. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. She had never met anyone who had been there that day. I didn't know that, sir. Commander Peterson gives a speech at every boot camp graduation. It's tradition. He talks about honor, duty, sacrifice, all the things your father embodied. Brennan paused. I think he would want to know that James Mitchell's daughter is here, that she's carrying on his legacy. Sir, I don't want special treatment. This isn't about special treatment, Mitchell. This is about respect. Your father died serving his country. You have every right to honor him publicly. And maybe, just maybe, it's time for these other recruits to learn something about judging people by their appearance. Sarah didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to keep her secret hidden to earn her place without anyone knowing about her father. But another part of her, the part that carried his name on her back, wanted the world to know. Wanted to stand up and say, "This is who I am. This is where I come from." What do you need me to do, sir? Brennan smiled slightly. Just keep doing what you're doing, Mitchell. Keep pushing through, keep showing up. And when the time comes for graduation, let me handle the rest. Sarah left his office feeling lighter than she had in weeks, but she also felt afraid, because in 2 weeks, everything was going to change. The secret she had carried for so long was going to come out, and she had no idea how the other recruits or the officers would react. That night, she lay in her bunk and ran her hand over the tattoo on her shoulder blade. She could feel the raised lines of ink beneath her fingers. "I hope I'm making you proud, Dad," she whispered into the darkness. In the bunk next to her, she heard Garcia shift and sigh in her sleep. Across the room, someone was snoring softly, the ordinary sounds of boot camp at night. But for Sarah, nothing felt ordinary anymore. The countdown to graduation had begun, and with it, the moment when everyone would finally see her for who she really was. The last 2 weeks of boot camp were the hardest. The physical training intensified. The academic tests got tougher, and the psychological pressure reached its peak. This was when recruits either broke or proved themselves worthy of becoming sailors in the United States Navy. Sarah threw herself into the final challenges with renewed determination. Something had shifted inside her since the conversation with Staff Sergeant Brennan. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't shrinking from the mockery. She stood tall, looked people in the eye, and performed every task with precision. The other recruits noticed the change but didn't understand it. To them, Sarah had become even more arrogant, more of a loner. The comments continued. "Look at her," Porter said during a break from drill practice. "Thinks she's better than everyone else now." Kowalski nodded. "Probably planning her next tattoo. Maybe she'll get failure written across her forehead." But Sarah didn't react. She just kept working, kept pushing, kept proving herself through action instead of words. The night evolution came during week 7, a series of challenges conducted in complete darkness. The recruits had to navigate an obstacle course using only their training and instincts. They had to work together, communicate, trust each other. Sarah's group consisted of Reynolds, Chen, Garcia, Porter, and Martinez. The 6 of them stood at the starting line as the sun set over the training ground. Staff Sergeant Brennan briefed them one final time. "You will complete this course as a team. If one person fails, you all fail. If one person quits, you all wash out. You have 2 hours. Your time starts now." They ran into the darkness. The first obstacle was a wall that required 3 people to boost the others over, then be pulled up themselves. Sarah, being one of the strongest, stayed on the ground to boost others. She lifted Chen first, then Garcia, then Martinez. "Come on, Mitchell, climb up," Reynolds called from the top of the wall. But Porter was still on the ground with her, and Porter, who had mocked her for weeks, was struggling. He had injured his ankle earlier in the day and was limping. "I can't make the jump," Porter said through gritted teeth. "My ankle won't hold." Sarah looked at him in the darkness. This was the guy who had called her trash, who had suggested giving her tattoos with his fists. She could leave him behind, tell the others he couldn't make it, watch him wash out of boot camp. But that wasn't who she was. "Get on my shoulders," Sarah said. "What?" "You heard me. Get on my shoulders. I'll boost you up high enough that they can grab you from the top." Porter hesitated. "Why would you help me?" "Because we're a team. Now get on before we run out of time." Porter climbed onto her shoulders. He was heavy, and Sarah's legs trembled under the weight, but she steadied herself and stood up straight. Above, Reynolds and Kowalski grabbed Porter's arms and hauled him up. Then they reached down for Sarah. She jumped, caught their hands, and was pulled up and over the wall. They continued through the course. A rope bridge over a dark pit, a tunnel they had to crawl through while water poured in from above, a cargo net that swayed dangerously in the night wind. At each obstacle, Sarah found herself naturally taking charge. She called out instructions, helped the weaker members, kept everyone moving forward. And slowly, gradually, the others started to listen. Even Reynolds, who usually led, deferred to her judgment. The last challenge was a simulation of a shipboard emergency. They entered a small building filled with smoke machines and flashing lights. Somewhere inside was an injured sailor, actually a weighted dummy, that they had to find and carry out. "Split up," Sarah called. "Garcia and Martinez check the left side. Reynolds and Chen take the right. Porter, you're with me. We'll go straight ahead." They moved through the smoke-filled corridors. Sarah could barely see her hand in front of her face. The sound of alarms was deafening. This was designed to simulate real chaos, real panic. "Mitchell," Porter's voice came from somewhere ahead. "I found him." Sarah pushed through the smoke and found Porter trying to lift the dummy. His injured ankle gave out and he stumbled. The dummy fell. "I can't do it," Porter said. "My ankle." "Then I'll carry him and you guide me out. Can you do that?" Porter nodded. Sarah hoisted the 150-pound dummy onto her shoulders in a fireman's carry. Her legs screamed in protest. Her back felt like it was breaking, but she started moving. "Left here," Porter called. "Now right straight ahead." They made it to the door. The rest of the team was already there. Together, they carried the dummy outside to the safe zone. Staff Sergeant Brennan was waiting with a stopwatch. When the last team member cleared the building, he clicked it off. 1 hour 47 minutes, that's a passing time, barely. He looked at each of them. Who led this mission? The group was silent for a moment. Then Reynolds spoke up. "Mitchell did, sir. She got us through." Brennan turned to Sarah. "Is that true, Mitchell?" "We all worked together, sir." "That's not what I asked." "Yes, sir, I took the lead." "Why?" Sarah thought about her answer. "Because it needed to be done, sir, and I could do it." Brennan almost smiled. "Interesting. The person who everyone else treats like an outsider is the one who saved your team." He looked at the others. "Think about that. Think about it hard. Now get back to the barracks. Tomorrow's your last day before graduation." As they walked back, Garcia fell into step beside Sarah. "Thank you," Garcia said quietly, "for not letting us fail." Sarah nodded but didn't respond. She was too tired for words. That night back in the barracks, something felt different. The usual hostile silence had shifted into something else, something uncertain. Sarah could feel people watching her, reassessing her. Porter approached her bunk while she was polishing her boots. "Mitchell, can I talk to you?" Sarah looked up. "What do you want, Porter?" "I wanted to say, look, I've been a jerk to you. The things I said, the way I acted, it wasn't right. You could have left me behind tonight, you could have let me fail, but you didn't. Why?" Sarah set down her boot and looked him in the eye. "Because being better than someone doesn't mean making them fail, Porter. It means lifting them up. My mother taught me that. And even though you've done nothing but mock me since I got here, you're still my teammate. That means something to me." Porter looked down at his feet. "I'm sorry, really. I judged you without knowing anything about you. That was wrong." "Yeah, it was." Sarah picked up her boot again. "But thanks for saying so." Porter nodded and walked away. Sarah noticed several other recruits had been listening, including Reynolds, including Chen. The next day was graduation preparation. They practiced marching. They prepared their dress uniforms. They learned about the ceremony protocol. Staff Sergeant Brennan was everywhere, checking every detail, making sure everything was perfect. He pulled Sarah aside briefly. "Tomorrow, Commander Peterson will be here. I told him about you, about your father. He wants to meet you after the ceremony." Sarah's stomach flipped. "Yes, sir." "There's going to be a moment during the ceremony. Trust me and go with it. Can you do that?" "Yes, sir." That night, Sarah barely slept. Tomorrow, her secret would come out. Tomorrow, everyone would know the truth. She ran her hand over the tattoo on her back and thought about her father, about the man she had never really known but had spent her whole life trying to honor. "I hope this is okay, Dad," she whispered. "I hope you don't mind me showing the world what you meant to me." In the morning, they dressed in their full Navy uniforms, white caps, pressed blues, polished shoes. Sarah looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the person staring back. 8 weeks ago, she had been lost. Now she stood straight and tall, a sailor in the United States Navy. As they marched onto the parade ground where families and officers waited, Sarah felt her heart pounding. Somewhere out there was Commander Peterson, the man who had known her father. Somewhere in the crowd was her aunt and her little brother, who had taken a bus from Wisconsin to watch her graduate. And somewhere inside her was the courage she would need to face what came next. The parade ground at Naval Station Great Lakes was filled with rows of folding chairs where families sat watching their sons and daughters prepare to graduate. The morning sun was bright and warm. Flags snapped in the breeze. The band played patriotic music. It was the kind of perfect military ceremony that looked like something from a movie. Sarah stood in formation with her division, straight and still. From her position in the third row, she could see her aunt and brother in the audience. Her brother, Tommy, was 15 now, tall and awkward in his too small suit. He waved at her, and Sarah had to fight the urge to wave back. Staff Sergeant Brennan stood at attention in front of their division. Behind him, on the raised platform, sat several officers in their dress uniforms. One of them was Commander Peterson, an older man with silver hair and a chest full of medals. Sarah's father had served under him. That man had held her father's hand as he died 20 years ago. The thought made her throat tight. The ceremony began with the national anthem. Then came speeches from various officers about duty and honor and the proud tradition of the Navy. Sarah barely heard them. Her mind was racing, wondering what Brennan had planned, wondering how her secret would come out. Then Commander Peterson stepped up to the podium. His voice was deep and carried across the parade ground. Ladies and gentlemen, families and friends, new sailors, today we celebrate not just the completion of your basic training, but the beginning of your journey of